I think partly because they have quite active regional governments as well that are very committed to supporting these.
They have in Italy also the national contact point is quite active. So one advice would be also to contact your national contact point
for the LIFE program, right?
Yeah,
LIFE
for
program,
the LIFE program. Yeah. We have national contact points. There are people from the different ministry, the different regional governments in all the member states that can help and give suggestions.
Yeah.
So I would advise the possible applicants to get in touch with these people that might have developed guidelines or material that is especially targeted at that
member state.
Yeah.
And these are people that's their job, right? I mean, they don't need, they're being paid to do that. It's not something that projects have to go out and I mean, they can request it, but it's not a
public,
paid serve.
In the case of Italy, it's the ministry. Well, what was the Ministry for Environment, and now it's Ministry of Ecological Transition. But in most of the countries, it is a ministry, person from a ministry,
a civil servant.
Or I saw in Germany they have many contact points. They're more specialized in different fields, so you might find one that it's more specialized on your field.
Yeah.
But that's public and you don't have to pay for this. It's a service provided by your country.
So that's a useful thing to remember. Now, when you get to the process of informing projects, you've informed them, how do you go about the grant agreement process? Because mostly the grant agreement process is, as I understand it, there's a template, right?
Yeah.
They're pretty much all the same. You might tinker with bits.
The grant agreement is, it's more or less the same.
Yeah. So it's not open to negotiation. It's not as if a project can come and say,
I mean, the contract is the contract, that it's standard. Negotiation, what do you mean? We have a revision process. We have a revision process in which we are supported still by the experts, and we send a number of questions for clarification or to change a number of things.
To look at the budget again,
It happened, for example, that now I don't remember the exact issue, but we requested for a project to cut some money in an activity, and they asked, could I use this to increase the communication or this that I think is a bit weak, and that was okay. I mean, if it's something that makes sense, we can reorganize a bit the budget, provided it's already of a good quality, otherwise the proposal fails.
Yeah.
But we can adjust a bit, but then the contract is standard at the end.
And could you put a time frame from the point that you've notified the project of its success to the start of a project activity? Some projects might be more ready than other projects, correct?
That doesn't depend very much on us. We put, cannot be earlier than, I don't know, July of the year after, it depends on the call on the year. Yeah. But then each project puts a starting date in the proposal.
I see.
So there are some, usually it's around September. I mean, when it was in spring, most of the projects would start in September, October, and some would say, January the year after. So, but most of them are in was September, October, with a call in the spring.
Now we've spoken to a number of, had a number of the NEMO monitors on Bauhaus Radio this week. You do have this very rigorous monitoring setup, don't you? Can you tell us a bit more about that? Why it's so important and how it works so effectively?
This is also a good question for the beneficiaries, because we hear that it's important because they are very happy with the service. Basically, there is a monitoring team that it's quite geographically distributed, in the sense they are usually from the member state of the coordinating beneficiary of a project. Sometimes they are from a neighboring country, but they are able to go more often to visit the project, and they really follow the project closely. So they have a lot of knowledge about the LIFE program, and they're really able to support and to help the beneficiaries step by step during the project implementation. And we could see that this is an added value. Usually, we asked, and the beneficiaries are very happy about it, and we have a very low error rate also for the payments it's a small, high quality program. And I think the monitors have a big role to play. Also because here in Brussels, we manage a lot of, each of us has a lot of projects assigned. So we couldn't
You don't have the bandwidth
we don't
the
have the possibility
to follow everything.
Really to support the projects as the monitors do.
So those monitors are the crucial link. And I guess they are part of, they reinforce that sense of family in the LIFE program. Do you feel that sense of coming here today and seeing colleagues and it's a very special community, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very special community, and this is why I was saying also in another meeting a few days ago. People tend not to leave from the LIFE.
Really, once they get into it.
You can see people start saying, but these people that work on the same program for years, and then you get stuck.
Yeah. You're happy to get stuck in a sense.
And also because I think I can speak also on behalf of my colleagues, we are really proud of what we do.
Yeah.
We can see really a value, and we are extremely proud. So.
Yeah. As I've understood it, Simona, there is an element of new European Bauhaus in funding streams from the LIFE program. Have I got that right?
Yeah.
I think you've allocated around 13 million euros for projects that focus on the concept. Is there more you can tell us about that? And in terms of how projects are lining up to because we've seen the new European Bauhaus prizes, for example, attracted some fascinating projects. We had 2 of them on the program this morning. What's happening in that respect? If you're able to tell me, maybe it's all too early or too.
I have to say that I don't have yet all the expertise and all the knowledge, but it's indeed one of the high priorities of the new commission. So it has been thought to create a special line for this process. So the idea is to really give a bit of possibility and of funding, really to push even more on the aspects that have been analyzed and prioritized during this 3 days conference. So,
how long have you been involved with the LIFE program?
So I have been involved for a short. I think it's since 2010. Yeah, I've been 2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what 11 years. So in that sense, you must have seen your fair share of projects. You were saying about 5,500. I think it was Marisa who was just before you. Can you pick out, 1 or 2 ones that particularly resonate with you, that you think, that your favourite projects? It's perhaps like with children, you shouldn't have a favourite project.
It's very difficult.
But there must be 1 or 2 really special ones that you just, that had a magic feeling about both the ambiance, but also the achievements that they got.
Well, I will start from the end. I've been visiting a project last week, 3 weeks ago in Spain, Life Sapa Urban. It's a project about the protection of. I work mainly on nature and biodiversity, so this is why on the protection of the lesser kestrel. These are birds that are really, really tied with man and with the urban environment, and sometimes when this is also linked to architecture, to beauty, to everything. It's when there are renovation works, their nesting sites are destroyed. So I went to visit this project that collaborated. It was the coordinating beneficiary was the Junta de Extremadura in Extremadura, and the sustainability department worked in close contact with the tourism department and with the cultural heritage department in all the part of Extremadura, and they found a new way to renovate historical heritage buildings. A close connection with the architects, with all the actors, and integrate the nature component in it so that these birds can still nest. They are working also with the tourism, people from the tourism.
The authority,
authority and guides, tourist guides, so that they value even more they put into they make it shine, that this heritage that is not only cultural, they have beautiful cities, but sometimes they are not aware also of the natural richness that they have.
The benefits, yeah.
So I think it was super nice because I could really see various departments that were involved. People that were from, directors. When I went there, there was also the director of agriculture who joined, even if it was not involved in the project. They managed to put together all these people and to work, to collaborate, because unfortunately, even in departments or even the commission, sometimes we are in our silo. We are concentrated on our work, and we don't manage to get in touch with the other and to integrate our ways of working. And there, I think there was a beautiful collaboration. And the architects now, when they do a renovation for an historical heritage building, they think about the nesting site for the
kestrels.
So they are really. I found it very, very beautiful.
Yeah. It brings to mind other projects that I've, come across. I was on holiday in Sardinia over the summer, and there's a project to protect rare seabirds from rats on the island that eat the eggs. I mean, do you find that nature projects kind of, because you can envisage the animal itself, it's a little more, maybe it has more attachment to people directly, because they think of the bear that you're reintroducing to the mountains or the lynx. I mean, there have been some fascinating projects that have really literally changed the landscape, right? Yeah. I mean, it must be, as you say, there's a sense of great pride for you and your team. What other? Give me another project before we round things off.
This one thing, but this is really personal. When I went to visit a project on turtles in Greece, I was really moved by seeing these animals in a rescue center, because there are many problems, environmental pollution, but also they are bycatched sometimes.
By fishermen.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in Greece, it also happens that fishermen, as they think these animals predate on
the fish they want to catch.
There are some that really, they can
decapitate.
But can harm very.
They harm the shells.
And the heads. And there was this rescue center. And I could see these big animals that they seem so strong, but at the same time they seem so fragile.
So vulnerable. Yeah.
I think that was more an emotive part, but it really struck me.
Yeah.
And the care of these other people, the care that were giving to these animals. That was the project Life Euro Turtles.
Do you still get to go to the odd project now? I mean, we were talking about the monitoring structure where the monitors are closer to the project, but you get to visit some?
The old projects, unfortunately, it has never happened to me, and I was discussing during my last monitoring visit with the monitor, because we go together, about the fact that it would be interesting, and I think we could take a lot out of it, also doing most ex post monitoring. Because some projects don't show the results immediately. I remember a monitor that told me he had a project on the forestry, and told me at the end of the project there was not much, but I've been done 10 years after, and I could really see the difference.
The benefits.
But I know that our monitors now are working on a number of ex posts, but they were saying it would be even interesting to increase, because we take out so much information, so much lessons, and probably that's an aspect that we could explore.
So if you could sum up the LIFE program and what it means to you in a sentence, one phrase, could you do that?
I mean, I would say that LIFE, it's a program for the environment and for the people. It's really something that it's putting all of us together. Well,
indeed, our slogan has been this week, beautiful, sustainable together, life in the new European Bauhaus. And Simone, it's been great to have you on, and you've been absolutely stellar, because you've kept going and going and going, and there's been so much we could talk about. But thank you, Simona Bagheretti, for coming on Bauhaus Radio. We're now winding up our 3 days here at the Life in the New European Bauhaus conference. And this afternoon's session will be the last, which will give us a good overview of both what we've discussed here in this week in the event lounge and what will come up in subsequent months and next year as the new European Bauhaus concept gathers pace. My thanks go to all the guests I've had on Bauhaus Radio throughout the week, to Claire Taylor and her team in NEMO and the NEMO monitors, and all the others from the Commission who've come on in particular, such as Simona, to keep me company during what's been a fascinating week. Thank you all very much.
My point being, I can't, with an interview, I can make it slightly longer or shorter. Yeah. I'm not interviewing him, he's making a speech. Okay. So I'm in his hands, but we're just waiting for a signal. Just going to be a couple of minutes late starting because we're making a connection with another live stream, so bear with us.
Sorry.
We're ready. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome back to this final session of our 3-day conference on beautiful, sustainable, together life in the new European Bauhaus, where we've been hearing over the last 3 days how the Bauhaus concept, those principles, are the very soul of the Green Deal. Bringing it to life, our speakers have said, to make it a positive experience, a human-centered experience, connecting us with our living spaces and helping to deliver a new culture, a new ethos, a new way of working together, a new way of developing and co-creating ideas. It's been very inspiring. We've also, over the 3 days of discussion, heard many examples of projects already implementing some of those key principles of New European Bauhaus. Even if the label wasn't there before, they've shown what can be done, and we've been discussing how to build on that. I'm not going to try to sum up all the very rich content of all the sessions that we've had. I'm going to leave that unenviable task to my co-moderator, to Philippe van den Abila, who, as you know, has moderated many of our sessions over the last 3 days. He has a panel with him of people who've been in some of those sessions, and they are going to try and pull the strands of all of this together, make sense of it, and identify a way forward. So, Philippe, an unenviable task, as I say. Happy to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, to be so grateful, Jackie. And indeed, this is where it all comes together. Over the past 3 days, we've seen and heard a wealth of ideas, perspectives, proposals, but also tangible results and achievements from projects that are testament, I think, of Europe's ambition to shape a more sustainable future along the principles of the new European Bauhaus: beautiful, sustainable, and together. So indeed, we've navigated through a fairly dense agenda over the past 3 days, which goes to show that this new European Bauhaus is attracting a lot of attention. This is not merely an aspiration. This is work in progress. Work in good progress, I'm glad to add. We are mobilizing the entire European community to build and shape a better future together. Yesterday, or at the very first day, on Monday, we started talking about engagement of citizens, about changing the behavior, changing the mindset of people. So we talked about engagement of citizens, we talked about incentivizing a behavioral change, but also addressed the challenges on measuring and monitoring that behavioral change. Yesterday, I enjoyed a lot of very rich and deep discussions on circular economy, on sustainable cities and districts, on the use of smart materials to reduce the energy demand of our European building stock. And I believe this morning we also learned a lot about how to listen and learn from Mother Nature and how to pursue, say, nature-based solutions in shaping this more sustainable, this better future. So what I, for one, felt radiating through this event for the better part of the last 3 days is a lot of energy, enthusiasm, positive spirits, and indeed the very soul of the new European Bauhaus. Now, we will try to tie that all together, see a little bit what are the bigger themes that have emerged from our discussions over the past 3 days, which are the greater common denominators, what are the takeaway messages, the take-home messages from this event, and also, more importantly, what are the actions moving forward. Now, in order to do that, I have picked one panel member from every single session over the past 3 days, and it is my pleasure to introduce that esteemed panel to you. Again, this is a hybrid event, so some of those panel members are with me here in Brussels. 2 other panel members will be calling in from locations throughout Europe, so it is my privilege and my pleasure to introduce that gathering of angels to you. Next to me, sitting next to me, is Judith Borsboom. A very warm welcome to Brussels again, Judith. She was a bit my sounding board yesterday during our last session where we were discussing sustainable cities and sustainable districts. Judith, again, is founder and director of Locality, which has a mission to improve sustainability and climate neutrality through innovation management. Next to Judith, and that won't be a stranger here today, is Ben Delbare. Ben is a technical monitor at NEMO, where he is also the prime contact for ecosystem services, green infrastructure, and nature-based solutions. And I believe in that very capacity, Ben, you have also moderated what I believe was a fascinating session on sustainable, beautiful, and inclusive nature-based systems. So thanks for joining our panel as well. Also, Gonzalo Sanchez has boots on the ground today in Brussels, so we had you on the call with us yesterday. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to welcoming you in Brussels here today. Gonzalo is Policy Officer for Circular Economy and Carbon Neutrality at the European Environmental Bureau, and delivered, I think, a strong statement yesterday on the power and potential of both sufficiency and circularity as two decarbonization strategies. Next to Gonzalo, we have Sami Akach, whom I introduced yesterday as an architect, an illustrator, a globetrotter, a creative maker, and a bit a jack of all trades. But during our session on circular economy, he presented prefabricated, unstabilized, rammed earth constructions as, I think, a very beautiful flagship example of sustainable building materials. And yesterday on the call as well, but with us in Brussels today, is Sébastien Delpont, who calls himself an energy transition facilitator. He is, again, head of the Net Zero Retrofit Market Development Team at Energiesprong and Chief Development Officer at the Sustainability Consulting branch of Greenflex. And those of you who tuned in to our session on energy performance of buildings will certainly recall his strong vision and warm plea to decarbonize the European building stock. Since this is a hybrid event, I hope to have 2 panel members with me remote as well. Laura Bouwman joined our concluding session on Monday. Hello, Laura, and thanks for joining us here remotely today. So she joined our last session on Monday to discuss the challenges in monitoring and measuring behavioral change. Again, Laura is assistant professor at the Health and Society Group of Wageningen University, where she conducts research on innovative approaches to nutrition promotion. So a very warm welcome remotely to you as well. And I hope to be having Simon Doka as well with us. Simona holds a PhD in technology innovation for the built environment, is currently Chief Innovation Officer at Gridability. She contributed greatly to our session on incentivizing behavioral change on Monday, and the very moment that she connects, we will be glad to reel her in as well. What I'd like to do with this esteemed panel, this gathering of angels, is indeed pick their brains and listen and learn from them what they took away from those last 3 days. What are the key takeaway messages, the themes that have emerged, and the messages we need to take home, and the action plans moving forward. Perhaps, since you're with us remotely, Laura, I'd like to start by asking you. And we've seen, I think, a lot of good solutions, prototypes, demonstrators, pilot projects over the past 3 days. Let me ask you, how can we, say, upscale and replicate those good solutions while, of course, also respecting the local conditions?
Yes, thank you, Philippe. This is an interesting question. Can you hear me well? Because I cannot hear myself.
Loud and clear, Laura. We hear you.
That's perfect. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, what we learned from the Suitable project that we are applying in a lot of different locations in the UK and Italy, and these locations are businesses and university cafeteria, is that for replication, as much as it is important to share what type of content we share, for instance, healthy eating guidelines, communication, it is even more important to share in the replication how to do that, how to accomplish that, and to highly value a participatory process in deploying a project from the start. But it has been proven that many locations are not used to that, and it might be a very new approach. So in our replication, we stress highly, how do you do that? How do you connect with locations as being researchers or having another function? And how can locations do that among themselves? With all type of actors, from we have CEOs up to kitchen staff, up to students, up to managers, everyone. And everyone also needs examples how to learn to work together for a certain goal. So that would be my message today. Yeah.
I believe already a very rich reflection, Laura, to kickstart our discussion. So thanks a lot for that. I hear indeed that we need to mobilize everyone. This is also one of the principles, obviously, of the new European Bauhaus. We leave no one behind, but we need the ownership from everyone across the value chain. So allow me to indeed take that first thought to our panel here in Brussels for indeed maybe a little bit of a brainstorm on how can we upscale and replicate some of the thoughts, some of the solutions we've seen over the past 3 days. I'd like to start with you maybe, Sebastian.
I think on the issues of deep energy retrofit, which is a key topic to address, we have to come from a time of early interesting demonstrator from scaling in volumes. Yet sometimes it's becoming an industrial challenge we have to solve. We're about to build gigafactories for electric vehicles, for change scales. I don't see a lot of gigafactories to build prefab sustainable solution. I mean, the example of my colleague is very interesting. We're developing a lot of more interesting solution. Now we have to step out of the vision of 100 buildings, 100 specification. We are at some point to acknowledge the fact that solving the challenge that we're facing should be an industry, that we are going to fight it with industrial tools in order to that many citizens in Europe could afford to reach that level of comfort, level of sustainability in their practice. So I think now is the time going from early demonstrator from building a real industry in place in economic sectors. What is not a tradition to have an industry, it's something uncommon. But I think that's also what's interesting if we come back to the history of Bauhaus, that came to all from an artistic movement. You come to a design and an industry to have like quality, efficient tools and comfort delivered to the utmost in society. And that's also one thing we should win on, is working on the desirability of those new lifestyles. We see that the two missing part in the climate conversation of the past days in Glasgow and COP, there was the issue of sobriety, having a lifestyle with different conditions, and the issues of energy efficiency. People are talking a lot of things which are absolutely needed in matter of rethinking mobility, hydrogen, that's nice. But we also need to think different the way we live in buildings and how we have to desire to live in net zero house, which looks as appealing as driving a Tesla. And that's something which is not there yet. which is a great challenge we have to work on. And that's what I think it's really coming back to the roots, our movements with artists trying to make something trendy, something desirable, and building a desirable society where we would dare to industrialize efficient solution. And we're not at the time of the early 20th century where industrial product, that was you can have any colors if it's black when you were about for the tea. No, it's not the time. We're at the time of mass customization, and you could find a proper mix of solution. And we could have 100 buildings or 1,000 buildings that all have the same heat pumps. Who cares? But they would have different facades, and that's the proper adjustment from 80% you take from project 1 to project B. You change only 20%, and then you make economy of scales, which you don't when from one project to another, you reinvent 80% of the design of the solution to keep only 20% of them. And the challenge is really, that's, I think, to go on.
I absolutely agree. I'll hand it to Sami in a second, but I'd like to reflect that very comment back to you, Sébastien. Yesterday, I recall your last slide, so you presented a fairly disruptive solution in order to go to net zero buildings. I recall from your last slide, you said we have a couple of prototypes and we have a proof of concept now, but then I saw some frightening numbers, I mean in my eyes, frightening numbers on how we need to upscale in order to meet the climate targets. So what is your own recommendation, so to speak, as to move forward and to decarbonize this entire European building stock? We were talking about 35 million buildings.
That's it. I mean, we're working with colleagues from the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, and France, and now upscaling a market for net zero energy retrofit done in an industrial way. And now we are into the thousands of building and housing delivered. I mean, it works. It can be done. Now the challenge is, given the numbers of housing we have to retrofit, I mean, yeah, it's multiplication by many zero behind the one that we need to achieve. And that's jumping to millions is the challenge. From the thousands to the millions is really the challenge we have to add into for the years to come. That's what we do for housing retrofit, starting with social housing, in order to lower the cost for that for every citizen. It become more affordable in the near future.
Yeah, so we need to, enable a value chain for massive production of sustainable solutions. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely, and we have to dare making an international market for it, because despite whatever we say to ourselves, it's still a nation-based market for a construction solution. We have a common market for apples, we have a common market for phones, we don't yet for our sustainable solution. I would like sometimes to drive to Netherlands to buy some equipment and install in my house in France. It's not possible. So because of some regulation that I think needs some improvement, but definitely that will be something strong in order that smart solution design in Austria, design in Spain, in Lithuania, wherever, could be more easily spread out for Europe is a big challenge we have to address.
Point taken. Thanks a lot, Sébastien. And indeed, Sami, Sébastien was already referring to your keynote address yesterday on rammed earth construction, a very provocative idea and likely a very good sustainable solution. But of course, you're up against the traditional way of constructing houses. So how do you see, the challenges moving forward in upscaling that, whilst also either respecting or complying with local conditions?
It's a big question. We face so many uphill battles with urban construction. First of all, the material itself is very hard to standardize because you find different material everywhere. But finding different material everywhere is also part of the beauty of it and the advantage of the material in that it's very local. We can build enormous buildings with material that's coming within an 8-kilometer radius, and we have done this before. Try to find material supply coming within such a small radius for other building materials. The issue we have is that there's a lack of knowledge in Europe now for urban building materials. It needs to be diffused, this knowledge, right? If you have a mason or a bricklayer, you can make a brick here, and a bricklayer in Germany will know how to use it, but we don't have that with our materials yet. So there needs to be this diffusion of knowledge. And
it was one of the remarks, well, a couple of remarks. I recall that Professor Skulitz also told us about educate. Yesterday, we also heard that we need, indeed, we have a lot of project results available, but we need that very dissemination in order to disclose that knowledge. So I think that's a very important part, to educate our workforce and also to have them embrace innovative solutions.
Yeah, I mean, the technology itself, like the rammed earth prefab, it's not rocket science. This thing has been invented hundreds of years ago, or centuries ago. And it's simple to learn how to use it. It's just the implementation of it in a modern way, in a modern context, of a European context, building at speed that we require on building sites now. That's the hard part a little bit. With our prefabrication, it's certainly helping, but we're not at a scale yet where you can have an inventory of elements that's to a standardized size, and it goes onto building site, and someone there knows how to use it. Yeah, there's all sorts of those issues. It's also a thing about, it's a building culture as well. In Western Austria, where we operate, there's a very strong building culture of timber construction. Yeah. Now, 30 years ago, no one wanted to build with timber, even though they had a lot of forests around. People wanted houses built of stone or brick or concrete. They thought there was a material stigma about it. They thought it was more durable. Slowly, timber construction advanced. There was more guys building with it. More companies started producing a supply for it. And now, 30 years after, it's a well-known industry. We're hoping that Earth can do the same thing, that the material is available everywhere, enough people know how to use it, and we can create a culture around using it. Because it really is a simple material. It's just, we've lost that ability to do it in Europe.
And sometimes, indeed, simple solutions can be the most sustainable, absolutely. Yeah. Gonzalo, you represent the European Environmental Bureau. What's your take on this, this topic?
Well, this is a difficult question as well. Well, but in general, I would like to say that we need to consider that learning from good experiences are a key point. And in some cases, in general, for example, we saw a lot of good experiences during the past 2 days. My colleagues here presented one of them. And, but all of them should be adapted at the local level, should be interpreted in somehow at the local level. We must to consider the economic, the social, and environmental impact that these solutions will have in specific regions. And this is key in this process, because it's a process that promotes this social and industry and the private sector, the public sector, all the different stakeholders in the value chain of buildings should have a common approach and a common dialogue to promote these solutions. And if we came up with some solutions and put one solution from Germany and implement that directly in Spain, maybe this is not the way that it gonna works. We have to rethink all the implications and to understand the national and local levels. And of course, we need to be conscious that in general, or this is our approach, there is no beautiful or inclusive building if this building generates an amount of CO2 emissions. And all this balance should be taken into account in this process to adapt these solutions at the local level. And that need to be based on this cross-cutting dialogue and multi-scale dialogue during the public administrations and the local level. Yeah, of course, and there's always society. This is another key point on this, no? Another agent.
There's no simple solution, but there are some pathways moving forward. Ben, I must say I was fascinated to see some of the nature-based solutions that we discussed this morning. So there's a lot, say, off the shelf available, a lot of proposals and ideas, but again, indeed, how to upscale that, taking into account local conditions. What's your 2 cents on that difficult question?
I think, as we demonstrated in the session this morning already, is that nature-based solutions are scalable by themselves. We saw examples from local schools, very concrete local activities, up to exchange at the intercontinental level. but I would even go further downscale. Even removing a tile from your garden and let plants grow there is a nature-based solution to reduce flood risk, for example. That might seem minimal, one tile, but it's, well, maybe to quote an artist again, one of my favorite bands, Tindersticks, tiny tears make up an ocean. It's the many, many tiles together that actually may reach that impact. And the same goes for the other examples that we saw on the peri-urban activities, for example. We have many activities in Life and in Horizon, which are usually very local, but for the upscaling, there is this exchange of information. I echo what the other speakers have said, exchange of information on the Live database, the Horizon database. There is a repository of nature-based solutions called OPLA, which results from Horizon project, or from a predecessor from it. So there is tools available, and it's mainly to exchange the experiences. But again, and certainly for nature-based solutions, I think this local condition is very important, because nature is different everywhere. It's even different from a brick would be the same in different locations. Nature is different everywhere, and it's unpredictable as well. So bear that in mind when you do your design. And just to pick on that, on one of the examples this morning as well, in terms of upscaling, the example of the school children, and the idea there to make the presence of green and nature in your surrounding the standard for these children. That will be the case, included in your design from the beginning of your projects, is essential to help upscaling.
Tiny tears make up an ocean. Can I read that as hearing that every little step that all of us would make, that it does not go unnoticed, that we can have our own meaningful contribution, regardless of how small a step it may look like?
That's exactly what it's about, yes. Each individual up to the largest companies and countries.
Crystal clear. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Ben. You did yesterday. You were both my conscience and the better part of my memory, so please help me out here as well today.
Thank you. I would like to focus a bit on the decision makers, because my gut feeling is that there are there's loads of interesting examples, there's loads of information, but not all of it is ending up with the right people when they are taking the decisions. I think it goes in particular for local and regional governments, but listening to the other panelists, I feel like it's also going for industry. So I think this is something we should think about, in my opinion. Let's say more classical ways of communication and dissemination sorry, don't suffice anymore. We need more, and maybe to have more kind of profiled information, like if I'm a city and I go to, for example, OPLA or Smart City Information System or another repository, how can I directly find the right information? Because especially civil servants are very much time pressured, yes, and we should not be naive about the amount of time people have at their disposal to work with good examples to prepare their plans and projects. So I would really plea for making much more use of visual flow charts, whatever, much better organized websites, maybe umbrella structures that link different repositories to each other, especially because we do not want to do only sustainability or only energy efficiency or only inclusiveness. Most people want to do it all, but we can find the examples in different repositories.
So you're saying again, educating, communicating, raising awareness?
Raising awareness, but also be much more aware of what type of information is needed at which stage of the process and who is deciding upon that. So if you have a project and you have an impact section, your entire flow of information should be tailored to that, to really push for that. Because I see fantastic projects, but then I see they are not making a dent in butter, as we say in Dutch, in the industry. And I think that's a wasted opportunity, because there's the knowledge is there, the experience is there, but it's, for some reason, it stays a bit confined.
So the ability to make an actual impact is a bit forsaken, so
I
to speak.
think we need to rethink this whole impact part and be much more bold and ambitious, but also think more precisely about which information is needed when.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions up my sleeve for this panel, including, of course, Laura, who is with us remotely. But the new European Bauhaus is leaving no one behind, so it wants to mobilize the entire European community, which is why I'm also reaching out to whomever is connected through whomever channel with us today. At the very end of the session, again, we'd like to hear from you. So if you have any questions, ideas, suggestions, remarks, for our panel or on the program of the last 3 days, please do convey them through Slido. It's slido.com, #New European Bauhaus. And in particular, I would like to learn from you as well, who are calling in remotely, from our audience throughout Europe. What are your takeaway messages? What's your take-home message if there's 1, 2, or 3 words or sound bites that you take from those past 3 days? Please do submit them through Slido, because I'd like to paint a very nice word cloud in order, say, to have a view at the wisdom of the crowd, what our audience has taken away from our conference. So please don't hesitate to submit that through slido.com, #New European Bauhaus, and we'll come back to that by the end of our panel discussion. Now, moving forward with the panel, let me turn back to Laura. Maybe before asking the next question, is there any feedback or any thoughts on what we've just discussed here in Brussels at your end, Laura?
I can say I'm so glad to hear these beautiful stories on really alternative ways through building, to really exciting, through art, to different approaches that are in the Bauhaus. I'm very happy that I learned about this.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura. And I'd like to throw maybe the second question at you. So we've seen and we've talked about a lot of good solutions, about how to upscale them, how to account for local conditions. So we talked about opportunities, we talked about pilot projects and opportunities. I'd now like to talk about, say, the challenges. So according to you, in this path that we have in front of us, what are the main challenges, the main obstacles, and of course also how to overcome them?
Yes, well, I'm speaking, of course, from the session I was in, which was about behavior change and how to measure that and how to accomplish that. And I would like to throw in the discussion that maybe it is one of the challenges that there is so much focus on behavior change, which is actually the outcome of a process that is way deeper inside human beings than only the observable behavior. And you mentioned, Philippe, that we need to focus on a different mindset. And I want to say it's even more challenging to go way deeper than the mindset and go to the real meaning and purpose of people. Like, why do they live their life in this way? Is that reflecting their true self, or is this something that has just, been orchestrated by society right now? And can we tap into that reflection of people that they may do have deep down inside the desire to change? And I think it's our big challenge to be able to touch that and focus less on behavior change, but really focus on the deeper meaning and purpose of life for people, and try to ignite a fire that they can take the lead of their own life and their own decisions. They don't have to listen only to experts, that they can only join the discussion also and participate.
So you're again indeed appealing to individual ownership, Laura. Thanks a lot for bringing that to the discussion. We do have a question from our audience, but it's a question from someone who's sitting 5 meters from our panel. I would even invite Professor Skoulos, who had a very nice intervention also on the importance of ethos when we were talking about sticks and carrots. Maybe to join us for a minute on stage, Professor.
Thank you very much indeed. I have a question, actually, to the panel. Bauhaus was started by trying to bring quality to mass production.
Yes.
That was the original idea.
That was the Gropius vision.
The original idea, which is, it was in a period of transition. We are again in a period of transition. It was very well explained that we need to have mass production in order to reach the targets. At the same time, Bauhaus had a quality with inclusiveness from the beginning. But we had different numbers. And what it was discussed here, again, is the need of flexibility and inclusiveness. The two things don't go easily together. Because yesterday also it was discussed, one of the needs is long-term planning and strategies that are not of 5 or 6 or 10 years, but 30 years or more. So how the flexibility can be combined with the decision of long-term and a kind of investment that is going to shape this behavior. Yeah. We are talking about, this is for me the biggest challenge within the Bauhaus approach. We need to have the individual, the flexibility, and at the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, we need to have the mass production homogeneity, which is not entirely close to the nature-based solutions, and the flexibility of the space. So here we have to make our choices, or rather a wise mixture of choices.
So seemingly conflicting interests, because the original Bauhaus spirit told us that less is more. At the very same time, we're hearing we need to upscale to mass production. We need flexibility, but we also need some rigor in long-term planning. So how to combine those different aspects? Anyone in this panel who wants to go first? Gonzalo, please.
Okay, well, maybe we can think in another way about these questions, because maybe we must stop thinking about growing in somehow, and maybe we can start thinking about thriving, which is not the same. I mean, in somehow, we need good solutions. We need good experiences. Maybe we don't need to increase the production of our materials or buildings. When we think about what we need to do with existing materials, with existing production, with existing buildings, trying to come up with the best solutions. And in that way, if we think about growing only in a traditional way, maybe we will replicate the same thing that we have been doing the last decades. And this is the challenge, trying to think in another way how we can drive together, but not to replicate the same kind of solutions. And this is a challenge for all of us. And it's positive, yes. It's positive for all, for the industry, for the civil society, for policymakers as well. But it's a challenge, and we need to overcome this mistrust of these potential solutions that could change everything a little bit. And for me, this is a key point. Yep. Not to replicate, not to do the same thing again, and trying to think out of the box.
Yeah. Judith, you wanted to add something to that?
Yes, because it resonated very much with one of the points I wanted to make. I think we have to be aware that the very moment we make choices for specific buildings, for construction, for infrastructures, for land use, these choices are there for a long period. So we will have to be put up with them for at least 50, 100, or maybe even 200 years. If you have a road, nobody will take down the road and make it nature again. With some exceptions. So I think we have to be very careful with that. But nevertheless, within the long-term perspective, so I see the long-term perspective really as important for making the right choices for the long term and not being too distracted by short-term successes. At the other hand, I think with the whole digitalization of production processes, with building information modeling, with all these other tools, we have a lot of flexibility we can create at the short to medium term with how we exactly do these things. Nevertheless, I think for our decarbonization pathways, it's extremely important to have this long-term perspective in place. But I think we have still a lot of freedom to shape flexibility and individual preferences in how we exactly do it.
Understood. You refer to digital in the building industry and all the tools we now have available. I'd like to then go back to Sébastien, because indeed we talked about that yesterday. So for sure you have your ideas on how to address the question just raised by Professor Skoulos.
I think it's a good question to ask, is how to scale up without just having a million times the exact same solution. That's the key challenge. And what we have to dare to address is what are the few standards we should promote. Getting out of the spirit I was saying, 100 building, 100 specification is essential. When we wear ourselves, I mean, basically with XL, L, M, and S 4 size, you can, basically fit 80% of the population. But there's a few standards. It doesn't mean that we have to choose for society, everybody's going to wear XL. Now, that wouldn't fit on some people. We are too thin, and great. But at least we define something which is not everyone goes to the tailor to have its own shirt made. That would be crazy expensive. So, and what also important, when you decide a size, you don't define a mean to go for that. And I think what is a key challenge to scale up is defining a few standards. I mean, if there was 100 size, we wouldn't work. It would be crazy expensive to wear ourselves and to reframe existing building. But with a few decent standards, I won't only see retrofit going straight to 0 or to 50 kilowatt hours per square meter or 100. And they should be no the way that those free ones. And then let's aggregate volume decent, because on some building, architecture will make it not possible to go at a decent price up to 0 energy. But on some, it works easily, pending we make the proper efforts. And then some people will find a mix of solution proper for earth building, which is a bit different than for concrete building or for that bricks buildings we're going to find. But I think it's really key to focus public policy on a few standards to promote, which not one, it is a few, and that let the creativity of designer, solution provider to find a solution in Germany who might not be the one of Ireland or the one of Greece. They're going to find, but there's a few standards we promote. Same thing for cars. I mean, for cars, there's a few standards. You want a family house, a sport utility vehicle, or a smart, which is for the urban, very small vehicles. So we have to define these few standards, and that being very, instrumental in scaling them up. I think that's a key way to address it.
I'm not implying we need to go to austerity, but are you saying that it may be an inconvenient truth that sufficiency is enough, that we don't need to have, like you said, a shirt à la tête de client, but a number of different choices, and that we should stick to that rather than targeting a never-ending growth and extreme personalization?
I think we have to, if we want this transition to be affordable and to have the impact we need on the world, the only way to make that is to, standardize and at some points volumes on mix of solutions that would be specific use case that we would see in the cities and building of Europe. That's really something which is very feasible. Other business sectors have shown how efficient that could be, and that's a big challenge we have to address.
Okay, thanks, Sébastien. Ben, you wanted to blend in some thoughts?
We'll keep it really short on that, but in response to this question on mass production, I can't resist to say in terms of nature-based solutions, working with nature, as far as I'm concerned, may be mass production, as long as we do it in a place-based manner. So the more nature is fine, but it has to be place-based, not standardized, indeed, in the same measures everywhere. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
But whilst I have you on the spot, what have you identified, say, as the biggest challenges or the obstacles to remove moving forward?
Perhaps one element might be, again, nature-based solutions, pretty hot at the moment in terms of policy and attention to it. So it's a big thing. that we, also following the mention by Florica Fink-Hoyer this morning, have to make sure that we start implementing, that we get on with it and avoid, like in the COP26, a lot of blah, 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 and in the end, no action. So I would definitely go for that challenge and make it happen.
Understood. I haven't given the word to you yet, Sami, so please, by all means, add your 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that was a great question about flexibility and mass production and the balance between the two. I would add to that comment about nature-based solutions that nature-based solutions are often more low-tech, in construction at least. You can adapt and work with them with very rudimentary tools, which means that the layman person or the local tradesman or whatever it may be can adapt them. So that flexibility on a local scale is very easy with nature-based solutions because you don't need sophisticated infrastructure to make it happen. There was a quote by Hassan Fadi, who was an expert in vernacular architecture, who said that building a house is essentially a communal production, that one man can't build one house, but 100 men can build 100 houses. Yeah. And this expresses kind of the nature of vernacular architecture, where if you have a material that people understand, that's local, it's often nature-based, they can come together and pool their resources and use it. But if it's something that can only be built en masse in a factory with specific infrastructure, that can be fine on mass scale, but when they need to adapt it, when you want to implement it at a smaller scale, it's a little bit harder. So that's why I advocate nature-based solutions, because it's just so flexible on a local scale.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for adding that, Sami. Laura, you're not with us here, but and you may not be able to see this, but your image is projected on a 7-meter wide screen on top of our panel, which goes to show that you are top of mind. So I don't know whether you fully grasp the question that was raised by Professor Skoulas, but he pointed out some apparent discrepancy between the need indeed to go to mass scaling, to go to mass production, but also the original spirit of the Bauhaus, where less is more, where we go for a certain sober approach. He also said we need some flexibility moving forward, but at the same time investment on the longer term. We need a more rigid framework for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So do you have any thoughts to share on that intricate question yourself, Laura?
Finding that balance is actually the true quest of life, also related to health. And it also is, I really agreed. I liked the expression of not growing but thriving, and trying within the needs of people to find ways to tap into existing resources rather than to create new ones. And I think I heard some of the examples in the panels that are about reusing and reconstruction rather than building everything from with new materials, new resources. So,
what I also heard, Laura, from this panel is all those tiers that can make up an ocean, but also the 100 men that can build 100 houses. You raised the appetite in our room when you showcased this very healthy, nutritious bowl, or this dish that you were cooking up for us. We all have to eat, right? At least 3 times a day. So is this also a leverage that all of us can take in order to have our own small contribution to this more sustainable future?
Definitely. That is also came up in our projects, with many people asking, okay, but climate change, you know, it's a big message. How can I contribute? Will it make a difference? And I also hear that a lot of times with people surrounding me, and it does make a difference. It shows that even in one location, that there was a reduction in the consumption of red meat, and more people started to choose like sustainable dishes. And that already got like a lot of CO2 saved and water saved. The water saved equaled like the water in Lago di Como. I don't know if anyone knows beautiful Italy. It's a lot of water. So yes, the message, keep spreading the message. Every small part will extend to a bigger part.
A lot of teardrops indeed. Thank you, Laura. And we have around about a half an hour left in our panel. I'd like to split that in half, so to put that time to good use. Again, I invite everyone who's tuned in with us to convey their questions through slido.com #NewEuropeanBauhaus, with also a clear plea to please convey your takeaway messages that we can indeed pick or learn from the wisdom of the crowd and design a beautiful word cloud to see what kind of common themes have stood out. So I'd like to spend the last 10 or 15 minutes going back to Slido and understanding what the feedback of our entire European community is. Before that, I'd like to spend another 10 or 15 minutes with our esteemed panel and asking them about their take-home messages. I appreciate we've seen a lot of information, so it needs some time to digest it, or it needs a bit of soaking time to digest all of that information. I appreciate we've been throwing a lot of information at you over the past 3 days. But Laura, maybe starting with you, what are your key takeaway messages from the new European Bauhaus event?
Yes, I'm not in Brussels because I'm teaching right now, and I'm teaching a course on foodscapes. And I have a lot of very young students are highly motivated to help co-design a more sustainable world. So they're very motivated, but I hear a lot of questions about, about what we call actionability. Like there is a lot of knowledge and there is some motivation, but what to do? And this is also very key in the project, that we discovered that people don't even know how to cook. I mean, we showed a video with my colleague cooking a very simple, sustainable dish, but many people don't know how to do that anymore. And so also they don't know how to shop properly, sustainably, where to shop, where to go, what to buy, what to select, they don't know. So my take-home message is that we have to pay way more attention to actionability and make it possible that people can start to act.
That's crystal clear, Laura. Thanks a lot for sharing that. And I also hear what you say about people who have forgotten how to cook. I think that we may have also lost the very connection between the food that we eat and the very ground or soil where it comes from. So thanks for bringing that to the attention as well. And a clear plea I hear for actionability. I'm very glad because this was one of the major themes during the past 3 days as well on education and dissemination. So I'm very glad that you're also in the process of teaching. So thanks a lot again for that as well. Laura, coming back to my panel here in Brussels, and I propose to go counterclockwise for this round. Judith, what are your key takeaway or take-home messages from those 3 days?
Yeah, well, at first I see there's a lot of similarities between the struggles to get these type of projects implemented and the projects and the things we like to do with the Smart Cities Marketplace. So I hope we can team up, because I see, for example, our action cluster on citizen focus. They have already prepared a very nice solution booklet with a lot of big projects 2 years ago, which could be very instrumental also here. So I really would like to set up this collaboration. So I'm going to work on that, and you're not yet, how to say, I will come back to relevant people.
There's little doubt in my mind that all partners will be willing, ready and able. Yeah.
The second thing is I'm very much impressed by the enthusiasm. And as someone who is slightly older, I think we really have, we cannot fail the younger generation. We really have to pull up our sleeves. And Laura already said we have to make it actionable. So I think we have to do our very best and go beyond that to really distribute the word, have these knowledge, experiences distributed far widely. Hence also the comment I made earlier about how to disclose this knowledge and how to distribute it. I think our, let's say, usual way of communication is not enough.
So you're also saying we are bearing a responsibility versus the youth of this world?
Yeah, definitely. And the last thing, I think the big elephant in the room, in my opinion, is the appreciation we have in our societies of, let's say, softer values, as connectedness to nature, of sustainability maybe in a broader sense. And I think that hampers a lot of progress. So it's time for fair balancing, I would say, fair appreciation, not leaving air pollution, CO2 emission, etc., too much behind the curtain, but really putting on the table in really, there are lots of good methodologies to do that, but show the impact in the wider sense, also on inclusiveness, aesthetics, of course. Take that all into account. As I said earlier, people don't want to do only energy efficiency or only social inclusion or sustainability or nature-based solutions. We want to combine it. We want to do it all. So enable that, I would say.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Judith. Ben, what are your takeaway messages from your session, but maybe also from Monday and Tuesday's different sessions?
My personal take-home message is, I think, when preparing for this event, for this conference, and hearing about Bauhaus, say half a year ago, my initial impression was, okay, it's pretty conceptual and intangible, difficult to grasp what actually is the idea about it. But now, attending this conference for 3 days, it makes it, I see the potential. It's a great potential for this movement to make things happen, indeed. And from the perspective from nature-based solutions, that clearly has reinforced my conviction that it's a great tool to make this interconnectedness visible. It's a great element for a narrative to make the connection between the circularity that we heard about yesterday, the behavioral change and what have you. So the various connections. And then certainly the presentation on Monday, I think by Antoine Lebeau.
The storyteller. Yeah.
The storytelling. I think that's definitely something which he said makes us humans unique compared to other animals, that we are able to do storytelling, to have a narrative, to make these kind of connections, to bring across a message. So for me, nature-based solutions would definitely be high on the agenda to bring to the life community and others working on these themes.
Yeah, I think it was also a very strong message on storytelling. We need a narrative. So, Gonzalo, if you go home, what would be the narrative from those 3 days?
Well, there were a lot of narratives and good solutions and good approaches. But if I have to take one of them, I would say that we need to think about the short term and the long term, both of them. And the New European Bauhaus is a good platform to discuss it. For instance, we also need to be conscious that we are in a pivotal moment to drive these change. For example, we discussed about circular economy, we discussed about nature solutions, and all these approaches, all these ideas should be included now in the next year, this year, at the European policy level, and to be implemented at the national level. We cannot delay this process. We should do that now. Yeah. But maybe this isn't enough. And we need to think about the future in the long term. What other things we need to include in this narrative, in these discussions? For instance, I talked just about sufficiency, how we consume square meters in our houses and other offices, and how other things that we need to discuss in the long term. And this platform is perfect for that. And the good news are that there's a lot of good experiences across Europe with people, companies, NGOs that are working in that field. And this is not impossible, it's feasible. But we also need to see these contributions, these new ideas, this challenge in the policies at the national and the European level, both of them. And the first step is at the European level. This is why I think, from my point of view, because I'm working in an NGO for advocacy at the European level, we want to see these contributions at the European level this year.
I hear a certain sense of urgency and also the need to balance, say, the short term with the long term. It takes 1,000 days to prepare for 1,000 years. We only had 3 days, Sami, and a deluge of information, I acknowledge. What are the main themes or the main messages that have stood out for you?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed the storytelling point that we heard on the first day. I think that really appeals to me and the architect within me. The need to create narrative is something that people can grasp. It's more human and it's a little bit easier than analytical or rational thinking. But I also saw a lot of projects that were based on measuring and being aware of what our output is and various other things. But I don't necessarily think those two things are at odds. I think they can combine together. But one of the greater messages I think I saw was that this new European Bauhaus is this conversation and discussions happening in the context of the climate crisis. And we want to implement the Green Deal. And we're always thinking about this 1.5 degrees and everything like this. And this discussion usually happens in a very one-dimensional way about emissions. But what I've seen to this conference is that people are talking about addressing the climate crisis, and not just emissions and CO2, but in many other ways. And they know, and we seem to know that people won't do anything about emissions alone. They need beauty, and they need to do it together, and these other things. So when I'm looking forward at our environmental impacts and how bringing those impacts down so we can live in more harmony with the environment, I very much like the solutions I'm hearing that aren't just simply based on lowering emissions. It's a much broader perspective.
Thanks a lot for that, Sami, and I go over to Sébastien for your, say, common themes or main messages from this event.
I think what we don't need is just another room in the museum of prototypes. At some point, we need to change the scales, and for me, at some point, I would see as important key message. First would be to, as I mentioned, that it's true for energy retrofit, it would be for nature-based solution, circular solution, I mean, for all the topic. We need to standardize a few ambitions of solution that fit standards we need for the market, then make them desirable. You mentioned the issues of storytelling, I think is essential. Then aggregating this demand in order to teach people how to use, install, produce, and then industrials, and make it affordable. And to end up on the story, that introduction of food, I think something essential is how, I mean, cooking is impressive. I mean, my kid come to me with a and coming to storytelling, I mean, in the city of Paris, where there was this climate agreement, there was a movie that I was watching with my kids a few days ago, which is Ratatouille. Okay, I'm a French cliché guy, for sure. Another French guy taking food, but what's the message? In the end, you have the little rats saying to the people, anyone can cook. Yeah. And I want this message that anyone can transition. And when you cook, what do? You use local materials, you use local food at most, you use quality things. And best recipe are not one ingredient recipe. I mean, it's not just about digital tools. For sure, it's useful. Then you need proper financing mechanism, proper juridic tools. You need low tech, you need high tech. This is proper mix. It's just flour, flour plus sugar plus eggs, and then you come with something tasty. And to the proper vision, we need that anyone can cook and anyone can transition. And then the recipe, I mean, Italian cooking is awesome. It's not the same thing as French cooking. And there'll be different styles in Europe, and that's fine. Because then we'll feed this desire we need for something that embed. And it's coming, that's where we want to go, and that's where my kid want to go. Yeah. I mean, some kid want to go become chef, and he's top chef on the TV. I mean, when is transition chef on the TV of the show we have? I mean, this is something we have to build on.
Yeah. You call yourself an energy transition facilitator. I've been listening to an energy transition ambassador, so thanks a lot for sharing that, Sébastien. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to put them to good use because we are now looking at a word cloud that has come in through Slido, which I read as being the wisdom of the crowd. We asked all of you who are tuned in to our sessions, what are your key takeaway messages? And we are designing a word cloud with a number of items that have stood out. I would like to use this word cloud as a sounding board for my panel, because if we were to condense what has been said, what has been discussed, what has been arisen during those 3 days, if we were to condense that on one, say, poster, it may very well look at like this very word cloud, and this is what might end up at the desk of our European Commission, at the desk of the policymakers. So allow me to go to that word cloud, to pick out some of those greater common denominators, and then have the audacity of asking my panel members, how do we convey that message to the policymakers, and what would be your recommendations in terms of translating those key highlights into policy? I appreciate it's a bit of a difficult question, but I'd like to start with you. Sebastian, I see, for instance, parametric architecture, but do feel free to pick your own words from this word cloud. But I would be interested to understand if this goes to the European Commission, for instance, how can we translate that into policy moving forward towards a more sustainable future?
I think there's a new kind of policy to be imagined, which is a kind of a challenge in order supporting this innovation at different scale. Because from having a proper solution at industrial scales, I mean, that's something brand new, which is not new public policy, because that's nice to finance first scale and early days innovation. Then where do we come? And trying to overcome what I see as entrepreneur trying to do that, it's kind of valley of death in between being funded for a few early demonstrators to being mass market. Sometimes that's a challenge. Early days is expensive. Then it's 5 times less expensive. Then 10% less expensive. 20% less expensive. And going that path, that's something that succeeds with subsidy scheme that exists for, I don't know, solar panels or for battery electric systems. And we should there go that way for many more systems and solutions to help through the affordability and the market. The market reaching the proper scale. Yeah. And I think also what would be interesting, coming back to the same idea of focusing on a few standards, I mean, it's not the same thing saying to member states, you should diminish your energy by 20% in 10 years, than saying you should do it minus 20% in 10 years, and I want out of that, for instance, for retrofit, 20% of your retrofit to be at A level, 60% to be at B level, 20% at C level. Because that's in our target. In the same thing, for food, it's not the same thing saying I want diminution of pesticides by 30% and saying I want diminution of pesticides by 30% and I want 10% of your fields being translated to organic. I mean, we should dare doing in more specific standard target because it will help those innovators have kind of a warranted or visible market share that will allow for investment, also for private investors to invest in their fields, because too often you would see investors saying, okay, but why would I fund your company? We're not sure that will be a business and when this market will happen. So I think there's thing to build better bridge between early solution providers or existing, shifting their activities with this market and the societal needs. Yeah. So definitely, more policy to imagine in that way.
We see our word cloud extending and evolving, which kind of reflects the nature of our audience, which is a cognitive diverse audience. But what is very clear is what stands out in the middle of that word cloud are the nature-based solutions. So Ben, you've discussed it in depth during this morning's session. Now, I hear from Sebastian, we don't need another prototype in the museum. I heard from Laura, we need actionability. Fair enough, but I mean, how to make those nature-based solutions a reality, how to translate that into actionability.
I would say to bring the concept to those who may benefit from it, because as we said, it's a solution to challenges. Whose challenges are we talking about, and how can we customize nature-based solutions to address these challenges? So go on a journey with nature-based solutions to the various policy departments, let's say, DG Agriculture, whatever, to identify what is it that nature can offer to the challenges by those sectors, but also to the various stakeholder groups. Which stakeholder group has a specific issue, a specific challenge, and how can nature support that? And be honest in that as well. Also, what can it not do, or what could it bring which you may not want to have along that? So present a very honest but customized story to different situations. That would be my message for this.
What clearly stands out as well are the bold solutions. I'd like to throw those at you, if I may. Judith, do we need more ambition? Do we need to dare more?
Well, I think we should not be complacent. If we are complacent, we lose the battle. And I think as Europe, we also have a story to tell. We are different from United States, we're different from China. We do it the European way. And I think all these elements are part of what we share about let's say, the European narrative of our values. And I think we should be proud of that and also push for that. For me, there's one word missing in this cloud, and that is reindustrialization, because I think you also need to build an industrial base to be able to do that. I don't think we should be entirely dependent upon countries far away, and you have a lot of unsustainable transport. But also what stands out for me is working together. In my opinion, to get the financial picture ready, and then I'm not only talking about funding, because we are always talking about funding, but to really make this transition, we need a lot of private finance as well. There are loads of money, but there are not enough good projects coming to the financial parties. So we need really robust partnerships, I would say, for decarbonization and becoming more sustainable, that form the basis for really also not only tapping into the subsidy thing, but also into the private finance. And the working together, let's say a kind of combination of interests in a good way, that's the common denominator of that is very important as a base for getting finance.
We don't see reindustrialization. I do see connecting the dots and dare to dream, which again relates to your message.
I go for that then.
Sami, I also read wooden-based materials, engineered wood, prefabrication. What stands out for the architect in you from this cloud?
Yep, wood's good.
Wood is good, rammed earth is better?
Yeah, actually they work perfectly in combination.
Okay.
If we wanted to transition to a totally timber-built environment, we would need the space of India full of forest to be able to make that happen. So of course we need multiple solutions, but it's about using the right materials in the right places. Earth and wood work fantastically together because wood has tension and earth has compression. Wood can be a lightweight construction and earth is a heavyweight mass construction, and they work thermally well together, and it's really a beautiful combination that's been used for centuries. I would like to see, for instance, these solutions like earth and wood and brick all alongside each other when you're considering what to make your building out of. I'd like to see a lot less steel and concrete that you can do anything with, right? These should be for special occasions almost, because they are fantastic materials, except they're very intensive on our environment and our emissions. I see parametric architecture and design in there. I have to say I'm a little bit skeptical about this. I don't want to upset Sebastian.
He happens to be at arm's length, so...
For sure it has its place. But for a long time it was touted as the solution, but it's one of those things that requires a high skill set. And when you have a gatekeeper to go through to create your architecture or your construction, there's more fees involved. And I would like to see a bit more democratization of the building industry, where smaller scale operators can do things, where industrial materials are important, but not necessarily ones that you cannot use on a small scale, if that makes sense a little bit.
It makes perfect sense to me, Sami, so thanks a lot for that. Gonzalo, you're looking at a fairly crowded word cloud. What stands out for you?
Yeah, there is a lot of contributions. It's difficult to choose one of them. Well, maybe I would like to highlight again what Judith said about the collaboration and working together. Yeah. I think that we need the engagement of the industry, of the policymakers and the civil society to drive these change. And we had experience in the past. For example, when we started to discuss energy efficiency some years ago, all the community agreed on that. And it was a successful movement, and we need something like that, but bigger and more ambitious. And all of us, we need to understand the challenge. And if we cannot include every stakeholder, maybe we will fail in this change, and this could be something really complicated to change in the future. So in that sense, I think that we need to be together and to work together on this. And the other point is to involve and to to create the framework for these people, for these initiatives. We need to create the policy framework and the economical framework to boost and to facilitate that all these initiatives can be implemented in the real life, not just in some kind of places or like exceptions. It should be the norm in the middle term. And this framework is key to ensure this change.
Maybe to wrap up our discussions, allow me to go very briefly back to Wageningen, to Laura, if you're still with us. I don't know to which extent you can see the word cloud, Laura, but what caught my attention, and I'd like to ask your brief feedback on that one, is a soundbite that said, soil is life. What's your thought on that?
Soil is life. I have been teaching my students last week about that, and that when we have a healthy soil, we have healthy food, we have healthy human being. And that is, they were kind of like, oh, never thought about that. And I think that is something that is like key to life. And I think that's also something to chew on for the policymakers.
Absolutely. I think it's a very warm and a very inspiring thought to land our discussions here. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Laura. A warm thanks to my panel here in Brussels. And wrapping up, I'll share some of my takeaway messages with you. It has been my genuine privilege to be your moderator of the past 3 days, engaging in rich and deep discussions on engagement of citizens, on incentivizing, measuring and monitoring behavioral change, on energy efficiency, sustainable cities, energy performance in buildings, circular economy, and today also the power and potential of nature-based solutions. As a scientist and an engineer, I was thrilled to see so many innovative ideas, so many prototypes on the drawing board, but at the very same time also tangible project results, pilot projects, demonstrators going to show that we are already making progress in this pathway towards a greener society. As a European citizen, I am filled with a sense of pride. I, for one, am proud that Europe is taking the lead in decarbonizing our society, in transforming our society and shaping a more sustainable future. We've talked a lot about the new European Bauhaus as being the soul of the European Green Deal. I'd like to draw the attention to the heart of the European Union. In my humble opinion, the heart of the European Union is in its second word. It is the union. We unite people, we leave no one behind. The next big thing will be a lot of small things, and we've heard in our panel as well that a lot of teardrops make up an ocean. So more than ever am I convinced that all of us can make a meaningful, if not an instrumental contribution in shaping our joint future moving forward. So here's my takeaway message. The world is navigating through an unprecedented pandemic, the COVID crisis. Around about 2 years ago, one unfortunate person got sick somewhere in Wuhan. Only a couple of months later, the entire world was virtually in lockdown. That tells me just how connected we've all become. The world has become one global village. And here's a ray of hope for all of us. We were never with more people on this planet, and never ever was it easier to connect and exchange ideas amongst one another. And by the end of the road, by the end of the day, ideas are the raw material for innovation and for shaping our future moving forward. So let's all rise up to that moment and seize the opportunity, connect with one another, share ideas, look for cross-fertilization, foster a scope for open innovation, challenge each other as we can all contribute to shaping a better future along the lines of the new European Bauhaus. Beautiful, sustainable, together. And on that note, I hand it back to you, Jackie.
Thank you very much indeed, Philippe, and thank you, to your panel. We heard in that last session a lot of passion, a lot of commitment to really implementing those new European Bauhaus principles. But we also heard, as well as the passion, a lot of concrete ideas for the way forward, the questions we still need to answer, the challenges that face us. So thank you very much. And Philippe, may I say it's been a joy and an honour to work with you over the last 3 days. Well done, ladies and gentlemen. Another round of applause, particularly for Philippe, for his fantastic moderation. We are almost at the end of proceedings, but before we go, I am delighted to give the floor to Dirk Beckers, who is the Director of CINEA, the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, for some closing thoughts. Dirk, great to have you with us this afternoon, sir, and the floor is yours to give us your final reflections on the discussions of the last 3 days. As I say, very rich discussions. We have covered an enormous amount of ground, impossible to sum it all up, but I'm hoping that Dirk will be able to do that for us. While we're waiting for him to join us, let me just thank all of our speakers over the 3 days for wonderful contributions, for many. When we started out, Commissioner Sienkiewicz said, this is all about being inspired and inspiring each others. And I certainly have been very inspired by what I've heard. Really some remarkable projects. And the point being, we now have a label for this, New European Bauhaus, but so much of it, as Commissioner Gabriel said, is already all around us. People showing what can be done, what is being done. We heard that this morning in our Changemakers session. So lots to build on, lots of work to do, but now my pleasure to give the floor to Dirk Beckers. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is, as you heard, Dirk Beckers. I'm the Director of European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency of the European Commission, in short, CINEA. So I should say I'm really pleased that I can be with you to close this event. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there physically, but nevertheless, I was really pleased that I could say a few words at the end of this event. Now, in the past 3 days, you had the opportunity to discuss several topics, from the engagement of citizens in creating sustainable cities to nature-based solutions and the role of our behaviors for transforming Europe into a greener society. I have heard very good feedback from the discussions, and I witnessed as well the enthusiasm of the speakers in presenting concrete solutions. Now, sustainability, inclusion and quality of life have been the main headlines throughout these days. These are key principles of the new European Bauhaus, and moreover, these principles are at the heart of the European Green Deal. But now, how to move from principles to concrete changes on the ground? Now, as you probably might have heard recently, President Ursula von der Leyen said that people should be able to feel, see and experience the European Green Deal. I must say I can only fully agree with her, and we need to see with our eyes improvements, to experience them and to feel them in order to change our reality. Now, I'm really proud that our agency, CINEA, is instrumental to achieve this objective, and that we contribute to it to a big extent. I'm equally proud that this platform meeting on the new European Bauhaus has served this scope by showing how LIFE projects can improve our society. Now, the LIFE program, Horizon 2020, and other programs of CINEA are important tools to move towards a greener, inclusive and resilient Europe. Please let me highlight that the LIFE program has been precursor in this field. Since 1992, this program has co-financed projects embracing sustainability in its 3 dimensions: social, economical, and environmental. Now, the program has been catalytic in improving the management of natural resources, improving the quality of our lives, and fighting against climate change. For the period 21 to 27, a budget of 5.4 billion euros will be available to continue with other projects and success stories. Now, during the last 3 days, I'm sure you could directly meet and talk with the drivers of the move to a greener Europe, which are the beneficiaries of the projects and high-level speakers. The first day was focused on engagement of citizens. Just to name a few concrete examples, I am glad to recall the achievements of the project Clean Sea Life, which raised awareness on marine litter and set up a new model of waste management of marine litter by involving fishermen, local communities, and policymakers. On the other hand, the work of Sue Eatable, which is promoting a healthier and more sustainable diet in private sector canteens, universities, and households, is also a great example how our daily life can be positively impacted. Then on day 2, the main topic was on sustainability and inclusiveness in cities. LIFE has several projects that combine energy efficiency with principles of circularity, livability, and aesthetics. In this field, the integrated project behavioural is working on improving energy efficiency in buildings in Belgium and launch tools and financial support to this aim. In particular, I would like to highlight the work with vulnerable families in Mechelen to set up a collective renewable energy system. This initiative supports vulnerable families who have limited financial means to invest in the renovation of their home. Another live integrated project, Live Prepare, is developing professional expertise for a holistic approach to building works, specifically oriented to multifamily houses involving all actors of the building chain. And then finally, today's discussions, they were devoted to nature-based solutions and their role in the fight against climate change. Numerous projects use nature-based solutions to adapt to the changing climate while tackling socio-economic challenges at the same time. For example, the Live Urban Adapt is implementing 2 different climate change adaptation approaches in the city of Rotterdam. The first approach increases the flood resilience of the Nieuwe Maas River by restoring its ecosystem and thereby enhancing its recreational and ecological quality. The second approach includes numerous interventions in the city district of Soho to improve climate resilience by increasing green infrastructure, creating water storage capacity, improving infiltration capacity, and reducing heat stress and flood incidents. Furthermore, I found as well very interesting the work of the project Horizon 2020 Interlace in Latin America, working on nature-based solutions to restore degraded areas. Now, the presentations for the selected new European Bauhaus changemakers are yet another source of inspiration on how the new European Bauhaus can support the implementation of the green transition. Commissioner Sinkevicius said you are the changemakers that European Green Deal needs. Yes, you are. We are all together. During these days, we have been discussing what has already been done to learn from these success stories and shape our future. Now it's time to replicate and upscale these initiatives. So I would say enjoy the beauty of sustainability together with nobody left behind. I think that's very important. So I would say at this, I would conclude my presentation or my words to you by thanking you a lot for your attention and for having attended as well these 3 days, and wish you all the best. Best regards. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Beckers. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, it only remains for me to thank the many thousands of you who have joined us over the last 3 days and enriched our discussions with your presence, with your questions, with your comments. Thank you also for helping to get the new European Bauhaus message out with your tweets. We've been trending. We really have got that message out far and wide. So thank you to you all. And finally, an event like this doesn't come together by magic, particularly not in these challenging times of this new world in which we live, of hybrid conferences, which have its own opportunities, immense ways of reaching out to more people, but also more challenges. So I want to thank the team, the fantastic team, who have worked behind the scenes to make all of this possible over the last 3 days. They really have done a tremendous job. And with that, thank you so much for being with us. Keep going, keep the message going out there. Thank you. Have a very pleasant evening and goodbye.